Hi, everyone. My name is Elias Moloi, currently working as a senior cybersecurity consultant with Microsoft. I've been with the business for almost 3 years at this point. The main goal as a consulting team, we help customers to digitalize, move to cloud, as well as ensuring that their security is highly available and ensuring that all the threat landscape is mitigated. So yeah, I think I'm excited today to be talking about zero trust, especially how Microsoft strategy works on zero trust, and we'll be talking about different pillars. And then yeah, I think let's take it from there. That is myself, Elias Moloi. Microsoft Zero Trust Identity and Endpoints. Today we'll be talking about how Microsoft puts the strategy when it comes to Zero Trust. Basically, there is a few pillars: we identity, endpoints, data, networking, as well as application. But the focus of today's session will be focusing on the identity and endpoint pillars. So I'll be taking you through on how is Microsoft laying down its strategy to ensure that there is zero trust, especially on identity and endpoints. As we know that the world has changed, before we used to have users as employees. Today we have employees as partners, customers, and bots. Corporate managed devices. Before we used to have all these devices connected into the internal network. But at this point, we see ourselves with also the past 3 years. A lot of people have seen the past 2 years where there was the pandemic, and then people had to now resort to working from home, working from cafeterias, any place where you can be as long as you have access to the corporate network. On-premises applications, as I've just said, that we used to have all these applications localized centrally. And then we all know about layer security, where we have all these applications in an internal organization, and we have all these firewalls, all these mitigation controls to ensure that the apps are secure. But with the explosion of cloud apps now, we find ourselves that applications can be everywhere. We have partners, we have B2B. So this is the new reality that we're facing now. Monolithic apps as well, composed apps with public RESTful APIs. As I've mentioned, corp network and firewall. This used to be the key thing that we know that we have a firewall in place. And then once we have a firewall in place, we ensure that our data is safe. We've got all these malware, tooling, threat intelligence. But as I've mentioned, that the world has changed now. We see the parameters expanding. We connecting to private clouds. We connecting to public clouds. So the landscape has also increased. So this also poses a lot of threats that can be inherited by any organization. Let's talk about our new reality. As Microsoft, our new reality has changed, and then we live by these principles that ensure that data is secure, and then we ensure that our endpoints are secure. We ensure that our people, we used to call them assets, are secure. For example, let's talk about there is threats that we know as Microsoft. We live by the theory or the framework of Stride. We will talk about spoofing as one of the key things that we see happening in the world. We have tampering as well. We have repudiation, information disclosure, denial of service, elevation of privileges as well. So how do we, as an organization, ensure that our customers, our clients, even our internal employees are protected through this with this new rapidly changing world? So as I've mentioned, that the new reality is, and the new principles verify explicitly. What do we mean by verify explicitly? It's just basically always authenticate and authorize based on available data points. Including user identity, location, device health, services or workloads, and data classification. And we also talk about the principle of least privilege access. What is least privilege access? So basically what we're saying here, we're saying limit user access with just in time and just enough access to protect both data and productivity. One of the examples here would be that we know in IT we have administrators. Before, we would find that administrators have highly privileged roles 24 by 7, meaning that if that account gets compromised, automatically this could assist the hackers in obviously compromising the environment. So all we're saying is that just-in-time access, only provide the access when it's required, and then just provide enough access, not to find that someone that is an admin has highly privileged roles. And one key principle is always assuming the breach. Minimize the blast radius for breaches and employ security strategies to prevent lateral movement. So as I've just mentioned that any threats that pose an organization where we could find that the hackers or for malicious use of data, people can jump from one device to another device up until they get to the device that they want to actually access the confidentiality and also hamper the integrity as well as the availability of the business. So how do we protect that? So these are the key principles that we'll always put in mind whenever we talk about zero trust, that to ensure that we have this in place and then ensure that all the organizations live by this to ensure that they minimize the threat landscape as well for their organization. Microsoft Zero Trust, like I've said, that is so. How does Zero Trust employ our new principles? So every access request has strong authentication, authorization within policy constraints, and inspected for anomalies before granting access. So every user's identity or application hosting environment is used to verify the request and prevent the breach. And we need to limit the impact of potential breaches as well. And then we need to apply segmentation policies to employ the principle of least privilege. As I've mentioned that there is policies that we have tools that we'll talk about while we're still carrying on with the presentation that can help you to deploy all of these policies. It can be on your mobile devices, it can be on your laptops of your users to ensure that there is segmentation, and then there's also a principle of least privilege access. But the essence of zero trust remains simple: security models which assume safety based on network location and inadequate. So what do we mean by that? So I will give an example that you find that in this world of cloud, we have applications that are running on the web. I mean, you need to understand where are your users. As I've mentioned, that the world has changed to a point where users or assets or subjects are not in the office anymore. So that means that everyone is working all over the world. So now, how do we protect those devices, and how do we identify the location and ensure that if we start seeing locations that are not part of our trust, we ensure that those devices are not able to access the corporate environment? Basically, here, this is how the Microsoft Zero Trust architecture approach looks like. As I've said, that we have identities. When you look, we have multi-factor authentication, user session, and risk. So what do we say when we say verify identities? We need to understand and knowing who's requesting access. Is it essential? Identity must be validated explicitly, not feared from environment, and we ensure we are secure at a point by accessing and bringing users into a common identity system. And how do we use this? By using a strong auth and threat intelligence to validate the authentication. As I've mentioned, that we have tools like multi-factor authentication to ensure that it's a two-factor authentication to ensure that the subject is actually the person that is supposed to or has access to request to access the applications. Second thing is that we know that we're living in the world that people have on their devices whereby they can access corporate data. So how do we ensure security there as well? We need to verify devices. And how do we do that? All data access requests results in transfer or data browse on an app. Knowing the state of the device is critical. As we know that we have iOS devices, Android devices. So ensuring that the health of the device is up to date. It's very critical to ensure that any malicious attacks or any threats that are out there, the device is not vulnerable. And then obviously we have devices today, we call them MDM. It's a mobile device management application that we can use to protect the critical data. Next, we have on the key architecture, it's something that we call protecting as well the data. How do we protect the data? So whenever possible, data should be protected from unauthorized transfer by auto classification and encryption. This protects against intentional or accidental misrouting of downloaded data. The next one that we have as a pillar is hardening the application. Application access and configuration must be secure to mitigate risks and to ensure that access is governed by policy. Second, on the pillar, we need to protect the infrastructure. Where we're using cloud workloads as IaaS or PaaS, ensure utilization in your cloud fabric according to best principles and utilizing intelligence and protecting, providing protection where required. A key thing as well is that we need to govern the networks, mitigate lateral movement by using an intelligent adaptive segmentation strategy for workloads, monitoring and protecting from abnormal traffic patterns. So that is basically the key things that we would want to discuss when we look at Microsoft Zero Trust infrastructure. And how does this also drill down to organizations and how this can be useful and helpful for a lot of organizations to ensure that they minimize and mitigate data breaches. Zero trust objective. What is the key objective that we can talk to about when we come to zero trust? In a zero trust model is where they represent people, services, IoT, or we define a control plane in which access decisions are made. This is why having a strong identity is critical to the success of a zero trust security approach. With a modern unified identity and access management solution, we can explicitly verify identities with strong authentication, ensure access is compliant, and typically for the identity and automatically enforcing access control based on defined organizational policies. So basically, this comes back to the one of the key things I've mentioned on the previous slides that as we know that we have bring your own devices, we have all these devices and endpoints all over. We need to ensure that we need to have an explicit policy in ensuring that we verify the identities with the strong authentication, meaning that before we used to have a password. Once you know the username and then you know the password, you are able to access the resources. But now, as we know that there's a lot of attacks out there, we would want to also ensure that we have a second factor of authentication to ensure that the identities are protected and secured with a second factor of authentication. Verify and secure every identity with a strong authentication. As I've mentioned that connect all your users and applications, verify identities with MFA, multi-factor authentication, control access with smart policies, risk assessments, and then as well as ensuring that we enforce the least privileged access with a strong governance as well. So how do we control this? Connect all of your users and apps so you can extend the benefits of single sign-on to your users while improving your security posture. So when we look at before that, there we used to have the world where we have so many passwords for each and every application. But now, with the capabilities of Microsoft and obviously the zero trust architecture approach, we can actually now have single sign on whereby we find the user having access to different applications that might be internally, that might also be externally to third parties, just by a single username and password. This also assists as well where we found that people used to write passwords on papers and then leave them on desk, and this could cause risk and then cause a compromise. Verify identities with MFA. Secondly, we say verify identities with a strong authentication. Identity is the front door. Strong authentication is the single most important change we can take. Meaning that, as I've mentioned, that we have MFA, we can use a phone call where once you try to access resources, you get a call on your phone, you authenticate, you ensure that it's you. We have an authenticator app whereby you can just open your authenticator app and approve a session, as well as also we can get OTP services whereby you get a generated code that you can use to basically access your resources. Control access with smart and risk assessment to move past break static rules that hinder productivity and can leverage all of the signals of your environment. So basically here is the monitoring part and understanding your risk assessment when we look at the user behavior and then also the device behavior. I've mentioned in the previous slide that device health is quite important, as well as we also need to understand the user visibility. What is the risk? Password changes, what type of password are they using? How many times have this password been used? So all those behavior risks can be put down into an assessment, and this would also assist you in ensuring that you can see and how to manage the environment better going forward. Lastly, we need to enforce the least privileged access with strong governance to ensure users only get access to what they need. This will definitely lower the risk of bad actors from abusing credentials. As I've mentioned, that only provide your admin if the person is just doing basic admin, no system access required. We need to ensure that each identity has the least privilege and not have any privileges that they can use to hamper the system when they don't require the privileges. So yeah, the next topic that we will want to discuss is connect all your users and apps. As I've mentioned that we have SSO, single sign-on. This is just basically an architecture and illustration on how could this work and enable you to have a single sign-on on your application based on all the authentication and authorization that you have on different applications. As we can see that we have an Azure AD, which is our Active Directory, where an identity goes and accesses an application, maybe in the cloud, with the same username and password, you are able to access cloud applications. As internally, we would still maybe have applications that you still want to connect in a hybrid model. We have also an application proxy, Azure AD proxy, that can be utilized to ensure that you have visibility on your internal core application, as well as any applications that you're running in the cloud. So basically, as I've said, this is very key in a situation where it's passwordless, and then we ensure that it provides you with the greatest flexibility, convenience, and cost. And we also recommend that you use a Microsoft Authenticator app. The Authenticator app supports biometric push notifications, one-time passcodes for any Azure AD connected apps, and it's free to download from the Apple and the Android store. It is available. Then we have Windows Hello. For a great built-in experience on the PC, we recommend using Windows Hello. It uses your face or fingerprint to sign in automatically. And then we have the FIDO 2 security keys. They are now available from several of our partners and global in a USB or a biometric key. We already have over 100 million users of passwordless authentication, and this number is about to get bigger as we go. Verify identities with multi-factor authentication. As I've mentioned that there's different pillars. So in this coming slides, we'll talk and look at each and every pillar and understand how does this help organizations to move forward and what is critical to ensure that you have all this in place. So the key thing is it's very critical that only the right people with the right resources on secure devices can access your data anyway. We have Microsoft Conditional Access is an intelligent policy engine that is built in for this challenge. It is robust. Controls allows you to define specific conditions for how users authenticate and log in, access apps and data. And you can also customize and manage automated policies and get reporting on the policies applied on each sign-on. Let's take a real scenario here, real life scenario where you have multi-factor authentication configured to ensure that anyone that has a privileged account or administrator account is required to do multi-factor authentication whenever they try to access resources. With these policies, you've got a vast key controls that you can drill down to, whereby if we find that the identity that is trying to access the resources is not authorized, this could also block that account for any activity going forward, or this could also ensure that it enforces the MFA, or you can have a control to say this user is required to change the password because we are not really sure the identity that is trying to access the resource is the authorized principal that needs to access the resource. As I've said that we include password technologies, as mentioned, we have the authenticator, we have the Windows Hello, we have the FIDO2 security key. We could also use the biometrics in order to access these resources. Control access with smart policies and risk assessment. As I've said that it's quite important to understand where are your resources and then who is accessing the resources wherever they are. We need to understand where and what time, and then what are the controls that we can put in place. As we can see that we have signals, a user location, application and data sensitivity, we have a device, and then we have real-time risk. Real life scenario here would say, let's take that we have one of our users trying to access 365. The user is in a location in South Africa, or we can say Cape Town. The user gets authenticated to access their emails, and then maybe the user is using a device, it's an Android, or the user is using a laptop, can be any brand. And then from there, they are able to access the application. Within the next 5 to 10 minutes, we get another authentication request for a user that is trying to access the same resource, but now this user is in Johannesburg. When we look at that, this is where the real-time risk assessment comes in, which uses threat intelligence as well in the background and artificial intelligence to ensure and look at these risks and behavior of users and devices. So definitely this could also start being picked up as a risk. When we look at it, there can't be a situation where we have a user in Cape Town accessing an email, and then within the next 5 to 10 minutes, this very same user is now accessing the email, but they are in Joburg. Definitely, this is a risk. So this is where they verify every access attempt. So now with the conditional access as well, and as our identity protection suite, we can now decide and say, let's put controls in this. And when there is a behavior like this, what is the control? Are we going to allow access, or are we going to require that identity to be MFA'd, or are we going to limit access, or are we just going to definitely block access? So we can even have locations, trusted locations as well. We know that all our organization, all our users are in South Africa. They don't really travel outside South Africa. We can have a trusted location when that if they ever are in South Africa, all these controls are not required or only MFA is required. And as soon as we see an identity trying to access the resources out of the trusted location, then we ensure that we start putting the controls to either block the access or as well as require MFA. Enforce least privilege access with strong governance. As I've said, that user onboarded identity access. This is just basically ensuring that role-based access is quite key, ensuring that we provide the users with the access that they require. Access lifecycle oversight with access reviews. So ensuring that all the access is reviewed of privileged accounts on the system, admin rights, privileged identity management. So basically here, we ensure that people are provided with access or privileges for only what they need. End of life cycle access rights automatically removed. So this is just basically a workflow that is available to ensure and enforce least privileged access with strong governance and authentication. We have tools such as PIM, Privileged Identity Manager, that could be quite important, that could be used to ensure that the end-to-end life cycle of a user or admin rights, it is being monitored, and we ensure that we only provide people with access that they require. Zero trust identity infrastructure. As I've said, that the key principles that we need to live by is verify explicitly, use least privilege, and always assuming a breach. So when we look at verify explicitly, it's utilize all available signals to detect anomalies, push strong authentication, cryptographic bind tokens, and normalize vendor audit. So basically, this is the key principle of verify explicitly. Use least privilege access. We need to secure minimal access defaults, bind all identity to hardware, decentralize identity claims and verification, assuming a breach, continuous signal sharing between components. It's quite key as well to ensure that we have that visibility on track. So if we have to define this, maybe trying to put it in a real scenario, as I've said, that always authenticate an authorization based on available data points. We just need to iterate that more to say that user identity is quite important, the location is quite important, the device health is very important, service or workload, data classification is also important. When we just summarize the least privilege method as well, limit user access with just-in-time access and just enough access. As I've said, that we have a product called PIM, it's a Privileged Identity Manager Suite, that can assist you in this, where administrators, if they need to have admin rights, they can request this. This can be automatically approved. This can be sent to their line manager, where they can approve that access. And then we could also put time to the access to say, I only require this access for a day. Once the day has passed, this access will be automatically removed. The last one is assuming the breach. We need to minimize the blast radius for breaches and employ security strategies to prevent lateral movements. One of the key components that we also spoke about was the visibility in the device health and compliance. So when we look at our Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, mobile threat defense partner, we can see that device information detection. We have malicious apps, device manipulation, network exploits, data privacy violations, device health, as I've said, is quite important, encryption, and always version and email profile. So all of these are the controls and information that can be detected on a device. For an example and real scenario, maybe your OS version is outdated. this will be picked up, and then there will be a notification sent to you to ensure that your OS is on the up-to-date version, to ensure that you still have access to company resources. Your email profile as well, if there's been any changes, this is quite key to ensure that this has been picked up, and then you are notified that there is some changes that needs to happen. Then we prevent devices also that are jailbroken. We can block access to ensure that the enterprise applications are not exposed to any vulnerabilities. Restricting access from vulnerable and compromised devices. As I've said, that all these policies, we can look at the first step there, access decision. Endpoint manager provides device compliance status. Azure AD enforces conditional access. So basically, the first step would be you're trying to access a resource. The endpoint manager will provide your compliance. If your compliance is up to date, you're compliant, we have controls to say allow, enforce, enroll the device. So basically, if your decision tree goes to a point where your device is not compliant, then there is controls that can be put into place to block the access, remediate the device, or completely wipe the device. Zero trust compliance for mobile devices and apps. We basically look at our mobile device management MDM suite that we have, which is in Tunes. And then we have conditional access. We can restrict access to managed and compliant devices. So basically, this device is enrolled. It's any device that's enrolled for device management. We can get reports and measure device compliance, provision settings, certificates and profiles, and remove corporate data from devices. So a device that is enrolled and it's controlled by MDM, the benefits is that, as I've said, that reporting is quite important. We can report on the device and ensure that the device is compliant. And in the case that one loses their mobile device, there is a feature where data, which is company data, can be removed from the device. Then we have a mobile application management, which is basically managed apps, which is corporate data. Personal apps is a division with your personal data. In this, we can publish mobile apps to users, report inventory and usage, configure and update apps, secure and remove corporate data within mobile apps. So these are the key features that you can have, and then enroll your devices to ensure that zero trust compliance for mobile devices and apps is quite key, and ensuring that we don't put the organization into a situation where data can be compromised, and then this could cause any catastrophic issues with the organization's data. I think that is it for today when we look at the core pillars that we're discussing, which is identity and endpoints when we're looking at zero trust. Like I've said, that this is security is a day-to-day thing that I think everyone lives by, and then I think the most key people to ensure that security is enforced and then it is adhered to, it's the human. I mean, most of compromises, you see them in most organization, it's due to human error or behavior. As I've said, that the security is quite key to be there, but if the security controls are not followed as well as adhered to by us as the subjects that uses the data, it is quite dangerous, and it could put a lot of organizations into a lot of breaches. So yeah, I think thank you so much for the time. If there are any questions, they will be taken through the chat, and then I'll respond as I get any questions. Thank you.